The most well-known cryptid in the state of Wisconsin is the Hodag, which has become something of a mascot for the city of Rhinelander, as well as the northernmost part of Wisconsin as a whole. The Hodag is well known for its iconic shaggy green fur, glowing red eyes, and gleaming tusks. It has the head of a frog, the horns of a bull, the grinning face of an elephant, and the backside of a dinosaur. It possesses thick, short, clawed legs and a long tail covered in spear-like spines. It is estimated to be around 7 feet in length, is said to possess a foul, odorous breath like that of skunk musk, and supposedly travels in herds and lays eggs. The favored diet of the Hodag is said to be white bulldogs. However, it only eats these delicacies on Sundays. On other days, it has a preference for eating oxen, but it will also eat mud turtles, water snakes, and other aquatic life forms. Certain websites also make the claim that the Hodag also enjoys a good Wisconsin Friday fish fry. Its tears are said to taste like lemonade. However, it is also said that a Hodag never cries. The Hodag is also repelled by the scent of lemons, perhaps due to their similarity in scent to that of Hodag tears. And surely, anything that is capable of making a Hodag cry is a thing a Hodag would want to avoid. One interesting detail is that the Hodag shares a lot of visual similarity with the Mishipeshu, or water panther, of Anishinaabe folklore. Pictograms of the creature in question bear a striking resemblance to the image of the Hodag we know today. However, one thing most people will tell you about the Hodag is that it was either proven or admitted to being a hoax. The Hodag, or so it is commonly claimed, was nothing more than a deception, the result of the machinations of notorious timber cruiser and prankster Gene Shepard. But the claim of the Hodag being a hoax is, I believe, a pernicious falsehood that is spread throughout the cultural zeitgeist. If one goes back and looks at the original account of the Hodag, as put forward by Gene Shepard and recorded by his co-conspirator, Luke Lakeshore Kearney, we can conclusively prove that the Hodag was not a hoax at all. That Gene Shepard was a prankster, of course, none can deny. It is, in fact, difficult to find a folk history of Wisconsin that doesn't include a section or two dedicated to the man and his exploits. He once created a large mechanical rubber spring-powered muskie, which he set up to leap out of the water whenever people complained of poor fishing at a lakeside resort Shepard was invested in. He liked to convince women that the woods possessed a marvelous, sweet-smelling type of moss, tricking them into scouring the countryside in order to find moss that he had sprayed with perfume. He would frequently get out of conversations he didn't want to be involved in by suddenly foaming at the mouth, using a pellet concealed in his mouth to induce the foam, and feigning a sudden collapse into unconsciousness. And he also once terrorized Governor John J. Blaine by pretending to be a deranged assassin who had recently escaped from an asylum. But just because Gene Shepard was a prankster does not mean everything the man did was a prank. Shepard was a timber cruiser and a self-described naturalist of the Northwoods, and the story he gave of his discovery and capture of the Hodag while surveying Wisconsin timber country is, quite obviously, not a hoax once one has actually taken the time to read it. Shepard's original Hodag story can be found in the book The Hodag and Other Tales of the Logging Camps, written by Shepard's co-conspirator Luke Lakeshore Kearney. It is important to note that the original Hodag bears some noticeable differences from the Hodag we know and love today. Whereas the modern Hodag is red-eyed and green-furred, Shepard's Hodag purportedly had green eyes and black fur. The story as relayed by Kearney's book begins by explaining what exactly a Hodag is. The Hodag, it is said, isn't just some beast that wanders the wilderness eating bulldogs, but is in reality a vengeful, undead creature. And it all begins with an ox. During the 19th century, when our story is set, Wisconsin's timber country was filled with many immigrants speaking German, French, Irish, Swedish, and many, many other languages. Additionally, the ox drivers of northern Wisconsin were said to be a surly bunch. As a result, as an ox traded hands from one surly ox driver to another, the ox would be the subject to a large amount of colorful verbal abuse in dozens of different languages throughout its life. All these different swear words hurled at the poor ox throughout its life would result in the building up of a sort of negative energy within the abused creature, festering within the ox. When the ox finally sheds its mortal coil, that negative energy remains. If the remains of the ox are properly cremated for a length of time, said to be about 7 years in length, then this negative energy will be burned up and purified. However, if the ox's body is not burned long enough to fully diffuse these bad vibes within it, then the ox will rise again as a Hodag, seeking vengeance against those that wronged it in life. However, it is worth mentioning that the story also tells us later that the Hodag reproduces via eggs. So apparently, the Hodag that emerges from the remains of an ox is able to fully reproduce on its own after the fact. The Hodag, it seems, has two methods of reproduction: through normal sexual means and through a sort of supernatural abiogenesis. After describing the undead nature of the Hodag, the story then moves on to describing Gene Shepard and his encounter with the Hodag, Shepard spotting the creature during the course of his timber cruising work. It includes a basic description of the Hodag's appearance, which, apart from coloration, is consistent with the appearance of the modern Hodag. Shepard reportedly was so shocked by the discovery that he immediately returned to Rhinelander to make a plan to capture it, in the process seeking advice from the ancient order of the Reevaluating Society. To explain what this ancient order was, the direct description given by Kearney's book is that the Reevaluating Society was made up of great world-renowned men, selected from the farthest corners of the earth, men of great courage and chivalry. They were men who, in the rough-and-tumble fight with a bear, would toss their guns into the brush, stick their bowie knives into a nearby tree, and give the big Bruin both underholts in their desire not to take advantage of the beast. These bear-wrestling wise men based themselves in an ancient tent located in Rhinelander, and behind closed tent flap, the Reevaluators listened as Shepard explained his encounter with the Hodag, and then began planning the beast's capture. While the ancient order of the Reevaluating Society made their plans, Shepard began researching the creature he had encountered. Through Shepard's paleontological expertise, he concluded the beast was the missing link between the Ichthyosaurus and the Mylodon. Shepard also discovered a reference to the creature left on a parchment written by a hunter that he found while exploring King Tut's tomb. This ancient Egyptian hunter called the creature a Selblatki, and Shepard was able to translate this word into Hodag, which is where the name Hodag comes from. In the end, Shepard and the Reevaluators constructed a massive pit trap for the Hodag, 50 feet in diameter and 30 feet deep. They recruited a brave, daring, and award-winning marathon runner to then lead an ox as bait to lure the Hodag into the pitfall trap. The plan is successful, and the Hodag is captured within the pit. But what to do next? From here, the members of the ancient order of the Reevaluating Society, whom the book tells us at this point had not a sloping forehead or receding chin amongst the group, conferred with one of their esteemed members, a man by the name of Arthur Konitzer. Konitzer was said to be a mastermind amongst the order, possessing a massive, jutting forehead. Kearney's book also decides it is important to tell us that Konitzer was in no way effeminate, and assures us that he definitely doesn't wear frilly women's underwear. Definitely. Arthur Konitzer is then credited for inventing a cage in which Gene Shepard could use to safely display his Hodag at the Oneida County Fair. The Reevaluators transferred the Hodag from the pit to the cage by using some chloroform, and Shepard traveled around with the cage showing off his live Hodag from then on. Kearney's account then ends, noting that people interested in buying Hodag eggs should go bother a man named Mike Essex, who lives in Siberia, Wisconsin, a town that appears to no longer exist. From here, we leave Lakeshore Kearney's book and pick up the story at the point at which most other retellings of the Hodag story begin. Gene Shepard began exhibiting his captured Hodag at the Oneida County Fair, telling the story to captivated audiences and selling postcards bearing the image of the Hodag's capture, the first instance of Hodag-themed merchandise in Wisconsin history. Eventually, the Smithsonian Institution caught wind of this and announced it was sending out researchers to examine the creature that Shepard had captured. It was then that Shepard is said to have announced that the Hodag was not, in fact, a real creature. The Hodag in its cage was a mechanical construct covered in ox hides, one that could move a bit in order to give the illusion of life. Shepard and a number of his friends, including Lakeshore Kearney, had constructed the creature as a joint project. From here, most accounts conclude that Shepard had admitted to the Hodag being a hoax. However, think long and hard about the given story up until that point. Think about the fact that the Hodag was said to be a vengeful undead spirit, created by too much swear energy festering inside a verbally abused ox. Think about how the word Hodag is said to be a translation of a nonsense phrase found on a parchment that Shepard discovered in King Tut's tomb. Think about how this story randomly assures us that Arthur Konitzer of the Ancient Order of the Reevaluating Society definitely doesn't wear women's underwear. And now ask yourself, do you really think Gene Shepard expected anyone to take this story seriously in the first place? The retellings of Shepard's Hodag story that conclude that it was a hoax tend to leave out these more absurd details, completely glossing over the sillier elements of Shepard's story. At best, some accounts of the Hodag summarize Shepard and Kearney's absurd story of the Ancient Order of the Reevaluating Society by simply saying that Shepard claimed to have captured the Hodag with the help of some bear wrestlers. Accounts like August Derleth's The Wisconsin River of a Thousand Isles merely mention that Shepard claimed to have captured the Hodag, neglecting any and all mention of the absurd story he gave of its capture. But these absurd elements of the story that are omitted from most retellings are actually vital in proving that Shepard's Hodag was not in fact a hoax at all. American lumberjacks had a strong tradition of storytelling, tall tales, and fables. After a long day of work, the lumberjacks would return to camp to eat their supper and then relax. Some men would play cards or sing and dance or gather around the deacon's seat, where another man would sit telling absurd stories for the purposes of entertainment. It's from this culture of storytelling that tales of Paul Bunyan and Whiskey Jack originate. And it's where a large menagerie of strange and absurd monsters, known as fearsome critters, have their origin. Fantastic, impossible creatures like the axe-handle hound, the hoop snake, the goofus bird, the Totoroed shagamaw, and the Dunghaven hooter. Gene Shepard, as a timber cruiser, was a part of this culture. He is credited with the creation of not just the Hodag, but also the side-hill gouger, a burrowing creature that had its right side legs 1/3 the length of its left side legs, and so it could only exist on the sides of hills. Shepard told many Paul Bunyan stories as well, claiming to know Bunyan personally, and stating that Paul Bunyan's camp was on the Big Onion River 45 miles west of Rhinelander. He was a storyteller and yarn spinner of the lumberjack tradition. Yet no one claims that Shepard's side-hill gouger was a hoax. No one seriously entertains his claims of knowing Paul Bunyan. No one claims Shepard was pulling a hoax in asserting that a giant superhuman lumberjack made camp near Rhinelander. To be fair, one might argue that Shepard also never brought a mechanical side-hill gouger or Paul Bunyan to the Oneida County Fair, and might think that the fact Shepard and his friends made a fake Hodag to show people is proof that it was, in fact, a hoax designed to trick people. However, no one accuses the unicorn that occasionally appears at the Bristol Renaissance Fair of being a hoax. Everyone understands that even if Kira the unicorn is advertised as Bristol's royal unicorn, that in actuality, this is all just for the sake of entertainment. And so having an animatronic Hodag to enhance his story doesn't inherently prove Shepard was trying to deceive people with his flat-out ridiculous tall tale. So simply asked, which scenario is more likely? Is it that a ton of people in Oneida County actually fell for this story of a vengeful undead ox, animated by swear energy, captured by a secret society of bear wrestling wise men, and that this hoax was only revealed as fiction by the investigation of the Smithsonian Institution? Or is it that the Hodag was simply another one of Gene Shepard's tall tales, told for the sake of entertainment in the long-held lumberjack tradition, which a couple of Smithsonian midwits with no sense of humor took seriously and decided to go out and debunk? To assert the Hodag is a hoax is to assert that Gene Shepard tried and succeeded at convincing people that too much swearing can literally animate the dead. To assert the Hodag is a hoax, one has to overlook all the obvious jokes within Shepard's story. To assert the Hodag is a hoax, while knowing what Shepard's original story is, frankly, beggars belief beyond reason. To assert that the Hodag wasn't a hoax, however, one merely needs to assert that a bunch of scientists from outside the culture didn't get the joke and took it all seriously. Which do you think is more likely?